But this is our bonus review for this week for the battles, and this is our Hyperdrive Stereo with The Greatest Destroyer of Love. 11 tracks, 46 minutes, the long-awaited debut album from the Australian band, released November 2022 by Golden Robot Records. Produced by Matt Robbins at Colour Sound Studios. 3 singles have been released in the lead-up, including Contact and All Rights Reserved. This is a special little review we're squeezing in this week. I've been aware this is coming since I sat down with Matt and Mark back at their studio. I think that was like 24 months ago or something now. So this has been in the works for quite some time. The album was sort of originally written back in the 90s. They finally managed to sit down and actually get this thing recorded and good to go. So bit of a special treat to have this one sort of dug out of the vault and to be able to have it here for us to go through it. For those who don't know, Matt and Mark, who are part of this band, are also in Cicada Stone, who we love here at the show as well. That's why this all sort of ties in neatly with one another. So Dave, what did you think of the album?
Yeah, this is great. This is really, really good. The first time I put it on, it's just like, holy shit, this is like not what I've heard before. Right from my first listen, the first song comes on, the tone of the guitars and the vocals just grabbed my attention. I had no idea who was in this band. I obviously wasn't paying attention to Nikki because she was in the chat about this. I'm sorry. But I honestly had no idea who was in this band. So when I put it on, I'm just like, these vocals are great. They harmonize really well together. In hindsight, now that I know it's the guys from Cicada Stone, that makes perfect sense. They've always had really good voices.
Just for clarity, the vocalist is Jason Gann, who's a different beast entirely. So there you go. Yeah.
Okay, are they doing backup vocals or anything?
I think so, yeah. Mark is on guitar, Matt's on bass, you got Ago on drums, and you got Jason on vocals. That's the lineup.
Interesting. Cool. Okay. But yeah, the lyrics, they just tell some really, really gripping stories. That opening track, Meter Maid, listening to that, my first listen, I've already got the guitar tone, the vocal, and just like, hang on, what's happening in the story? This is a really interesting topic. Yeah. I don't think anyone has ever written a song about this topic before, about a child locked in a car, or the helpless drug addict is off doing what they have to do. But you heard about that. I remember hearing about shit like that 20 years ago.
Yeah.
In news reports and everything. So yeah, and the solo in that song's really good, and the cool use of wah. There again, the songs like All Rights Reserved, there's some cool bass at the start. Bass tends to get overlooked. But it provides some nice dynamics, and lyrics to that are excellent. There's nice use of words. All Rights Reserved, something we've all heard all the time. There's great context in this song. It does really well. Contact, another great use of words. The phrase, word from my sponsors. Much like All Rights Reserved, it's something we hear in day-to-day life, but they make it interesting in these songs. We can't, they're phrases that we hear all the time. That tired dress, that title alone, just carries up a lot of intrigue. That tired dress.
Imagery. There's a lot of imagery in these words. That makes sense. It does make you see.
You kind of get what it could be about. You see that title and you want to know what the story is even before you hear the song. So there's some really, really clever writing in this. And there's a vibe to the album. It stays consistent for the whole duration of the listen. The topics in the different stories, they're all different, but they all fit that mood. It's dark, and there's some really heavy themes, but it's not a depressing listen. It's kind of a cathartic listen. It's
picked up on the exact same thing. Yep.
Yeah. I mean, you go through some pretty dark themes, but it's kind of there's a uplifting resolution to what you're going through. And I like the honesty. I won't say I can relate to these songs, because fuck.
It's true.
But I can sympathize, and I can feel that passion and the kind of torment, but the resolution. Yeah. And it's just an album that's easy to listen to over and over again, but with each subsequent listen, I picked up on a new lyric or a new riff that just stuck in my mind. And the lyrics are usually something that get me thinking, and it takes me into a completely different place, and I have to go back and be like, oh fuck, I forgot I was listening to this. But it's a thinker, it really is. And as you mentioned, the songs were written 20 years ago, but never recorded them. I'm glad they have had a chance to record these, because these are definitely songs that deserve to be out there in the world. But I gave this 9 out of 10. Meter Maid, 13th Beach. All Rights Reserved, Contact, Hole in the Ground, and That Tired Dress. But with each other listen, you can find other standouts to enjoy. Great album. Definitely give it a listen.
Like we made the connection to Cicada Stone before, but listening to this one, you can kind of hear how these songs written in the 90s were the genesis for what Cicada Stone would sort of go on to become. The first album was really grungy. The second album from Cicada Stone was more 90s overall oriented, and this one feels like the precursor to that a lot more. So this is more sort of your alt rock or your straight up 90s rock in this one, where Cicada Stone generally more grunge infused. This one feels like it's come straight out of the era, which makes sense. We know the story behind the album. It was written in the 90s. They were going to record it, then shit happened. There was a tragedy involved, and then they had to sort of go their own way for a while. But they've come back to it all these years later, but these songs are still held up. And what's cool about it, and what makes it stand out, is that you don't get any of the sort of bad aging that you would normally associate with albums from that era. So there's like, it's 90s stuff, but this just sounds fresh, vibrant. And it's funny because, Dave, you touched on how dark the subject matter is of this one and how uplifting the listen is at the same time. This thing has some serious sparkle to it. Like, there's a lot of darkness in this one, but it's in the stories and the storytelling. The actual listening experience leaves you feeling good, which is remarkable. To get those two things to balance out so well is just an impeccable feat. Just, fuck, I don't know how you did that, but well done. If you like 90s or alt rock at all, this is one you got to check out. This is going to be right in your fucking wheelhouse. There's heaps of melody here, some great hooks in this too. The song certainly stay with you. The harmonies are bang on, as they always are with these guys. But this just does take you right back to that era. And if you're a fan of that, you're going to absolutely adore this record. For me, this puts me slightly in mind of more obscure acts like, or potentially more obscure acts like Our Lady Peace out of Canada, for example. There's just something about it. There's a witticism that's still bleak and dark, but there's also a charm to the music. There's a way they balance or juxtapose those elements to give this one a really neat sort of overall tone, which is just unmatched. And like the overall tone of this is just really wonderfully rich to listen to. I love the way this sounds. It's got this upbeat feel. It's a lot of sparkle, not heaps, but a bit of sparkle applied to it, especially on the top end of the guitar. But at the same time, the bottom end or the grit, the mids in the guitar are just fucking really gnarly. Like, there's some bite to it, which is really cool. Like, getting the grunt of this thing, the snap in the drums, the warmth and the rumble in the bass, the grit of the guitar along with the top end, and then the vocals coming on the top. The placement sonically of this to listen to is fucking glorious. And you got little things like tambourine hits, just here and there, just these little attention to detail moments that are just like ear candy for people like me. It's like, this just sounds phenomenal. It's well balanced, well mixed. This just sounds fantastic. Even if you don't strictly gravitate to the songs, the way this sounds is going to suck you in. Like you mentioned, I caught up on the storytelling, the emotive weight of it all, but the avoidance of cliche was really clever on this. They didn't fall into the tired old habits of rehashing those things. They just completely avoided the cliches, which is really wonderfully done. And while there aren't huge gear changes, there are gear changes, but they're not massive gear changes in this album. It's like you go through different shades of emotion on this one, which is really well done, and the way each song starts does separate them, so it's not like a blur or a melange of songs. It's just that there's this thing where there's a certain overall vibe to it, and they just colour that in really wonderfully well, and they've done a great job with the songwriting, the track order, the way it stays. The album length is just right as well for this kind of music. I think they've just done everything right. All the technical detail and the attention to it has been well nailed on this one for sure. Like I said, I love the mix. The mix is fantastic. There's great panning separation as well. What they're doing in Colour Sound Studios these days, one of the best studios in Melbourne or anywhere for that matter. They're doing great stuff now. But the vocals on this are probably the standout element overall, and that's the way it works with the songs, the harmonies, the storytelling, all that sort of stuff. The emotive conviction in the performance is well done. It's just a really riveting listen. It's not one you'll go and spin all the time, every day kind of thing, but you might, but it wasn't for me. But it's one of those ones where you put it on, and once you do put it on, it's really easy to repeat spin. You'll keep going back to it once you do put it on, if that makes sense. You'll go, okay, I want to listen to it again. And each time you do, it's like peeling back the old ogre onion thing. Just keep peeling back a new layer to these songs. There's so much going on to this. It's just so well done. And the writing, performances, all that sort of stuff really lean into that. It's execution upon execution. Writing, performances, production, the works. So well done from top to bottom. It's one of those ones where, if you know the backstory, it was originally done in the 90s. They didn't record it, they wrote it, and then they had to go their own way, and then they come back 30 odd years later to touch on this stuff. And it's a sliding doors kind of moment for me listening, because if this came out in the 90s, I reckon people would revere this stuff the way we revere Horsehead, for example, in Melbourne. Like, if not more. Because if this came out in the 90s, this was it was enough like the other stuff at that era to cut through or be a part of it, but then there was something about it, because the storytelling along with the tone of the music would be putting it above, because everything else at that time in this field was so morose and depressing. This doesn't leave it feeling that way. This feels cathartic, and so it would have leapt above. Like, if this had come out back then, my God, who knows how different history would have been, because I reckon these guys could have really just gone places. I think it's a fantastic album. I think it's well done. It is late in the piece kind of thing, but if this is your thing, if you like this style or this genre, this era, you've got to hear this album. I think it's fantastic. I have an 8.5 out of 10. It's enjoyable from start to finish. Hard to fault, but 8.5 out of 10. 13th Beach, Contact, and Greatest Destroyer Love are my standouts on this one. So yeah, check it out. Let us know what you think, folks. It's a cracking release, and we both really enjoyed it, which is cool.